Welcome to the first. You have a story. If you look back on your life, you've done things for the first time that no one in your family, in your town, in the country has done. This is Dr. Sandi. You have unknowingly paved the way for others without knowing it or even acknowledging it. This is where you tell your story so that those who come after you can walk in your footsteps to build their own firsts. Hey everybody, meet Monica Smiley. Monica is a truly enterprising woman. 23 years ago, Monica launched Enterprising Women, a global magazine that was the first to be owned by a woman and featured women-only entrepreneurs. Additionally, Monica and her husband were among the first couples to have an open adoption in the US. An open adoption is where the parents maintain contact with the adopted family. Previous to that, she was one of the first in the US to undergo an innovative surgery for scoliosis to straighten the curvature in her spine. Let's meet this truly enterprising woman who continues to forge new paths. You can reach Monica at her email at info@enterprisingwomen.com or connect to her on LinkedIn at company/enterprising-woman-magazine/. Hey everybody, this is Dr. Sandi. Today I'm speaking to a wonderful person, Monica Smiley of Enterprising Women magazine. Welcome, Monica.
Thank you, Sandi. Happy to be here.
And I have tons of stuff that I've got to ask you. Monica, I met Monica when I was an awardee. I'm not sure if I met you before then, but back in around 2007, I think it was, I was one of the women who was honored with the Enterprising Woman of the Year. And I think my business partner got honored another year. But what I remembered from the Enterprising Woman conference that I attended was I met Sharon Davison, who was one of the only other women who had a business similar to ours, which was we provided marketing and analytic consultants to Fortune 500 companies. Mm-hmm. She did the same thing, but she was on the technology side. And we were trying to meet Sharon for years, couple of years. And I think we had one email that, just got obscured, and we're like, you're a woman doing the same thing. And we found one other woman that did a similar thing, and she was in Virginia. And there at the conference, they said, Sharon Davis. I'm like, Peggy.
She's here.
And today, we've been communicating since then. That conference was really an eye-opener for me. And the women I met, I think I'm still in contact with most of them. So tell me, how did you come about starting this conference and this magazine that you have that's so wonderful today?
Oh, thank you so much, Sandi. Well, let's see. First of all, I have been a journalist my entire life. My degree is in journalism. And my husband, John Dancer, and I had a publishing company for many, many years, working with people who had ideas to start magazines, but didn't have the day-to-day know-how to do it. So we helped a number of people launch magazines in a variety of industries. And we published a magazine in the health and fitness industry for about 14 years. I had met John actually working for a photography magazine pretty much right out of college, where I worked for 7 years and he was there for 17 years. So we started a company together in the early 1980s and again, had a number of clients. But in the late 1990s, I was at a point where I really wanted to do something that I knew that I would love, that I would really be passionate about. And one of the women who worked with me for a number of years, a woman named Carol Janae, who was our managing editor, and I really started looking into whether or not there might be a need for a magazine for women business owners. Of course, I'd been a business owner for many years. And we looked around and, we saw Forbes and Fortune and Business Week and, all the publications that were out there in the late 1990s, but we didn't see anything specifically for women entrepreneurs. So, we did a search and we actually came across a website for enterprising women. So the magazine had existed in the mid 1990s and was published for about 3 years, and it had gone out of business. We reached out to them. It was owned by a man, but there were 3 women who had been involved in it as well, who were associated with NABO, the National Association of Women Business Owners, out in the LA area. And so, the phones were not working, but I finally, this is how dated this is. It's scary to think about it, but I wrote a letter and faxed it to them. And it landed in somebody's back bedroom, where you keep the fax machine in the guest room. And the woman reached out to me, and I ended up flying out to Los Angeles, and I met with her. And long story short, I paid $10,000 to buy the trademark rights to the name Enterprising Women, which we really liked, and a few boxes of files that were dated, lists that were too old to use, but what we gathered from it was their hearts had been in the right place. They hadn't burned any bridges. They had some good contacts, and we loved the name Enterprising Women. So essentially, my company started over with it in 1999, and then we launched the first issue in May of 2000. Again, what we saw back then was publications that were covering, of course, they were covering business, but they weren't covering women business owners. And if you looked at the staff box, you'd see very few women involved. If you looked in the magazine, you would see almost no women at that time being profiled. And we just felt like women needed to have a voice, and this was an opportunity for us to do something. And we had, many years of magazine publishing experience. We had been involved in a number of startups. So we just felt like it was something that we could do. So we launched it as a print magazine. And then within just a short number of years, it became obvious that there really wasn't a publication for women business owners anywhere in the world. And that we really needed to find a way to reach women in other parts of the world. And
now, Monica, when you started the magazine, did people have to pay to participate in the magazine?
A combination of paid and controlled circulation. So paid subscribers, but also when you use the word control, that means, you go after lists that are appropriate for the publication. So, for example, every NABO member got the magazine way back then. And really to this,
where I first saw you, because I became a NABO member in like 2002 or somewhere around there. So
and of course the Women Presidents Organization had just started just a few years before that. We profiled Marcia Firestone, the founder of the WPO, in the very first issue of the magazine in 2000. So, we started developing relationships with all the different organizations. We were in on the ground floor for WIP, Women Impacting Public Policy. We were at the table when WIP was organized, and we, mailed to their list and worked with them very closely. So, it was basically something that we felt was really needed. We needed to get it out there. Magazines were not being distributed in a digital format so much at that point in 2000. I mean, within a few years that became the case. But I had a woman who was involved, she still is, on our board of directors, Irene Natividad, who founded the Global Summit of Women. And, the Global Summit has been around for, I don't know how many years now, but I would say maybe over 30 years at this point, closer to 35 years. And so Irene has been doing this major event that brings together women entrepreneurs, women in corporate leadership from the vice president level and higher, women in government from the cabinet level and higher, women presidents of countries, women who've won the Nobel Prize. It's a pretty incredible gathering, usually
I've
around
never gone. It's on my bucket list to go to
it's
the global
phenomenal. It's
summit.
phenomenal. And so Irene is someone who literally cold called me the first year I had started the magazine and said, I am so happy to see that you're doing this. What can I do to support you? You know, I'm thrilled. And so we became friends. And in 2000, I think it was in 2001, the end of 2001, early 2002, she reached out to me and she said, Monica, you have to come to the Global Summit. It's in Marrakesh, Morocco. And it's so important that I'm going to pay all your expenses for you to come.
Gosh.
And I remember it wasn't that long after 9/11. And when I shared with my family that I was thinking about doing this, they all panicked and said, no, we don't think you should fly to that part of the world. It sounds dangerous. It's not a good idea. And, you know, I called her and she said, Monica, it's like going to Chicago. Get on the plane. You know, and so I went, and there were very few American women there that year. But what I realized, you know, at every breakfast, lunch, or dinner, when I was sitting with a table of women from many countries speaking a number of different languages, within a few minutes, we had shared business cards. We'd shared a little bit about our families, our children, and so forth. And you know, I said, as corny as it sounds, if women ran the world, there would be peace on earth, because everybody got along so well. You know, it didn't matter where they were from. And, you know, I had carried some magazines with me, not many, obviously it's a long trip, but I had, you know, one box of magazines with me, and I put them out on a table, and I went to use the restroom, and I came back and they were gone. And then for about 6 months after that, I had a steady stream of emails from people literally all over the world saying, we have nothing like this in our country. How can we get it? Yeah. And it became obvious to me that there was such a need. And so, you know, pretty much as soon as it was possible to do a digital magazine, we started to do that. And within probably 6 months, we had readers in 50 countries, you know, and today we have readers in 185 countries.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's just because there isn't, still to this day, there isn't anything out there. I mean, you occasionally will see a magazine for women in business in general, not necessarily entrepreneurs or, you know, business leaders, for example.
Very corporate focus.
Yeah, but just not anything like Enterprising Women. And then, you know, we've seen a few magazines come and go that have attempted to do it and have gone out of business very quickly. It's not an easy thing to do. And, you know, I think the reason that we are here 23 years later is that we have this community of women who are just extremely supportive of, you know, what we've done. They're passionate about it. They love it. And, you know, the support is there, basically. As you know, we started an advisory board for the magazine in 2003, and we now have about 150 advisory board members.
That was a great idea too, to really get the women involved in the magazine. And I know I've written a couple of articles, and it's really a good visibility thing to have, and it gets me writing again.
Yeah, and the story behind that was, in 2003, I wanted to start an advisory board for the magazine, and I reached out to Marcia Firestone again from WPO, and I thanked her for this over the years 100 times. But I said, Marcia, I really want to start an advisory board for the magazine. Will you help me brainstorm what it should look like? And she said, well, first of all, there's going to be an annual membership fee to be on this board. And I said, what? You know, no, I should pay them. And she said, no. She said, and Sandi, I know you're an expert on advisory boards, but, you know, she said, let's see if we can find women who are leaders, who have reached a level of success in their own businesses. They're willing to give back and support the mission of the magazine, which is to educate and inspire women to grow and scale their companies.
Now, you have to form a nonprofit in order to do that part, or you just blended it into?
We just blended it into part of the magazine. And, they have an advisory board. They're not a board of directors. They're,
Right,
in an
right.
advisory position, so they don't have fiduciary responsibilities. But, we basically said, okay, half of this board membership will be women who are philanthropic, who are willing to give back to support building this community and making sure that this magazine is sustained and stays out there. And the other half is going to be great PR and marketing for their companies. We're going to give them as much exposure as we can as a way to thank them for giving back. And the idea really behind it was, let's make them ambassadors for the magazine and people who can share their best practices. So even today, if you pick up the magazine, you see that the majority of the articles are written by advisory board members. If you look at the author credit, it'll say as a member of the advisory board, many times also a previous Enterprising Women of the Year award winner. And not a lot of, but a large percentage of our advisory board members have come from women who have won the Enterprising Women of the Year award. And they love the community. They have a good experience when they come to the conference, and they want to stay engaged with us in some way. So it's another way that they can, continue to be involved with the magazine. But
what I like about it, Monica, is that you're not competing with other organizations. You actually bring women from a lot of different organizations together in your magazine. Because I do belong to NABO, I belong to Women's Presidents, I belong to, NAFE, like anything with a female woman name in it, right. I belong to at the time. But they're very distinct and they have their own personalities, and I join them for different reasons, right? But with Enterprising Women, all those women come together for one common cause, which I really think is brilliant.
Yes, we've always said we feel like we're like Switzerland. Everybody loves us. We have no enemies. We want to keep it that way. And through the years, just as an example, WPO has nominated a group of women for our advisory board every year. And, we usually about 20 women, and we reach out to them, and it may not be a good fit for everybody, but, usually quite a number of them will come onto the board. So, and when I attend conferences with the other organizations and I identify women that I think would be great on the board, I'll reach out to them. But, it started out with, I think, about 13 members the first year. And one of the things that we did was to reach out to the presidents or executive directors of all the major nonprofit organizations and invited them to come onto the board. And then also to come to the conference and to share what their organization was doing. And in some cases, it was the first time they had been in the room with the leader of one of these other organizations. And we just said, if we can get them all in the room together and they can see what the other is doing and hear about when their conference is coming up and whatever other updates they have, we're going to build some bridges and some stronger partnerships. And one of the things many years ago, I was very proud of in terms of a recognition for the magazine was we received the Adrian Hall Award from the WPO, and they said it was for building bridges within the women's business community. And I love that, because that's exactly what we've tried to do, is connect all the various women from different organizations and put them on the board or recognize them with the award, get them engaged and collaborating with each other.
That I had 2 women this year who got awards, was 23 now, last year, who got awards that I was the coach for them. And I find women don't really apply for awards. They never think about getting themselves the recognition, right? And when I recommended it to them, they're like, oh, I'm not going to get picked. Like, it's not a matter of you getting picked. It's a matter of you trying to use this so that the world can recognize that you're doing something really valuable. And so they hesitatingly applied. And I have a picture with both of them because they were so happy and so excited. And, you know, the family came with them, which is another thing I like, that it's a way for the family to get involved and really see what kind of work that they're doing. And another thing I like about it is you have the tiers, because a lot of organizations are focused on women who are really successful and over that $1 million mark. But you have a category for women under $1 million, which the bulk of women entrepreneurs are under $1 million. They're like at 50,000 or something, you know, insane.
That's right. Yeah.
And so when I saw that category, I'm like, this is really good. It's for all women. It's not just for the uber successful kind of woman. And that's one thing that they enjoyed, is like, I'm not even making $1 million, and I got to be in a magazine with all, you know, all the women who are in those categories. And I thank you for that, because that is really helpful to a small business owner.
Well, thank you, Sandi. And I think it's also great when they're in that ballroom and they're also seeing and hearing about the women at different levels.
Very
that pushes them,
accurate.
that pushes them a little further too, to say, wow, you know, I'm doing great, but look where I could be. I'm going to, you know, keep working on that. The story behind the Enterprising Women of the Year Awards, if we have a minute, is, I think is kind of interesting, because that 2003 is the first year that we gave the Enterprising Women of the Year Award, and we gave 3 awards. 3 people won. And the year before, what had happened was, I was thinking about just doing a special issue of the magazine that would feature some outstanding women entrepreneurs, maybe 20 women. And I was doing a cover story on women in the food industry. And WPO had recommended Rona Silver to me, who was at the time had the largest women-owned catering business in the country. She was based on Long Island. And so I did an interview with her, and she said, and it went well. And first of all, she said, well, first of all, you have to put me on the cover. I mean, I want to be on the cover. Oh, okay. You know,
good for her.
I know. He was like, not shy. And at the end of the interview, she said, you know, Monica, if you ever want to do any type of an event, I'd love to host it for you. Just let me know, you know, and I'll do it. And I said, well, as a matter of fact, you know, I'm thinking about doing this issue of the magazine to shine a spotlight on a group of women entrepreneurs. I would love to have some type of reception and actually have some women there and recognize them. She said, oh, great, I'll do it. I'll host it for you. So the first 2 years of the Enterprising Women of the Year Award, we hosted in New York. It was just an evening 2-hour reception in Manhattan. And Rona came in with a catering truck, was at a museum, and it was over the top. It was lobster and chocolate flowing fountains. And I said, oh my gosh, if we're going to continue this, how will I ever do this at this level? This is just crazy. But it was, everyone was so impressed. And on top of it, there was an exhibit that was traveling around the country called Enterprising Women, 150 Years of American Women in Business, something like that.
Did they steal that from you? Was it
yes, they took our name. And Sharon Hadari, who many women know, who ran the Center for Women's Business Research and was on the advisory board, called me and said, Monica, you know, I just got invited to this reception. They're doing this museum exhibit and they're using your name. And so I remember I talked to a trademark attorney about it, and they said, and Harvard was involved in it. And they said, do you really want to sue Harvard? You know, why don't you reach out to them and see if you can get involved with it? And so I did that. And they said, yes, you can become one of the partners in this. You can get involved. So our name was, you know, going to be put, and the Ford Foundation was involved. There was, you know, a huge amount of money involved with this. And it was going to be an exhibit that traveled around to museums for 2 years. And there was a book that went with it. And they were showcasing, you know, Oprah Winfrey and Martha Stewart and, you know, all of these, you know, enormously successful women in business. So it happened that the exhibit was opening in New York that year. And so when we launched the Enterprising Women of the Year Awards, we did it at the museum that was showcasing this Enterprising Women exhibit. And everybody who came got to walk the exhibit through the exhibit, which was, I mean, it just coincidentally happened that way,
Right.
which was incredible. So the first year of the awards, we had just 3 revenue levels, and the top level was businesses with over 10 million in annual revenue. I've told this story many, many times. I called again, dear friend Marcia Firestone from WPO, and I said, Marcia, where are we going to find women entrepreneurs who have 10 million in revenue? She said, I don't know, Monica, but we'll find them. And, you know, and when I think about that, because it was, just over 20 years ago, now, you know, the average WPO member has, I think it's 15 or 16 million in revenue. And of course, they have Zenith Group for women with over 50 million. Yeah. Things have changed so dramatically in the way that women have learned to scale their businesses. And in those early years, if the business had a lot of revenue, it was probably a staffing company, right? Today, it could be absolutely anything, as we all know, you know, companies with huge government contracts, et cetera. So within just a few years, we looked at the nominations and said, you know, we've got enough people with over 25 million in revenue. I think we could raise that top level to businesses with over 25 million. So we did that. And then I guess it was probably about 6 or 7 years ago, we said, you know, we have enough people with over 100 million in revenue. I think we can raise that top category to 100 million.
Yeah.
And then this past year, I don't think we had a $1 billion winner, but in most of the last half dozen years, we've had at least one woman with over $1 billion in annual revenues winning the award. So, you know, if you think back on the growth of the women's business community, which is a testament to all the organizations like WPO and so many others that have helped women learn to scale their companies, but just how the universe has changed for women.
Absolutely. And
it's incredible.
It's also, for me, it was aspirational, inspirational and aspirational, right? I remember the highlight of my year was at the WPO conference when they started the 50 fastest. And I remember, I think we were just close to the $10 million mark. So we thought we were doing big things, you know, and then these women came up, and it was myself, Peggy, and Sarah Robertson. We were sitting at the table, and we said, we want to be up there one year. Why can't we be the fastest growing? And then they started to talk about how fast these women grow. And they were talking about women that were at 50 million and 60 million. And, you know, in 3 years, they were at 70 million. And we were like, oh my God, what are they doing? I mean, we really were interested in, if these people could scale, we wanted to understand what it is that they were doing in order to get to that level. And then we joined Platinum, and we were like, oh my God, this is what, you know, we're not a fastest growing woman, but we're growing fast enough for us to be proud of that. So, you know, when I see them in your magazine, someone like Ishma, I think is her name,
Asma,
Asma. She does the face modere.
Yes.
And I saw her at that conference. I'm like, that is amazing. And that is what we should all aspire to do. You know, Phyllis Newhouse. And every time I pick up the magazine, I flip through to see who's on the cover and what are they doing. So I know it impacts a lot of business owners, even if they don't know and they don't tell you, because it certainly impacted me for sure. And I'm proud to say I was an enterprising woman. I don't think I was ever on the cover, but just to be in it, you've got to be in it to win it.
That's right. And it's never too late to aspire to be a cover girl, right?
Yes, it was my pleasure. And I know you have some other firsts. So you mentioned that you were one of the first to have an open adoption. Why don't you tell me about that?
Yeah, when we started to think about first, it's funny, I haven't thought about this story in a really long time, but I do have two adopted sons who are now in their 30s, but when we adopted our son Austin in 1989, it was an open adoption, and that was very unusual at the time. It really was the start of open adoptions.
What made you do that? Since it wasn't prevalent and usually adoptions are very secretive and the papers are, complete, what made you get the impetus to actually say, I'd like for this to be open?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I had a woman who was working for our company at the time in the advertising area who had a relative who had adopted through an attorney in Topeka, Kansas. And it was a law firm that just, the man involved, his name was Alan, specialized in open adoptions. And his wife worked with him and worked with the birth mothers. And anyway, she had a very positive story. My marriage to my husband, John, was the second marriage for both of us. He had had 3 children from his first marriage. Mm-hmm. And it's maybe a little too personal, but he had had a vasectomy. And so we couldn't have more children.
Yeah, that's
and he tried having it reversed. And, if you wait too many years after you've had one, right, then the odds of them being a successful reversal, it's not good. So anyway, so we started to look at the option of adopting. And again, I had this young woman working for me who had had this experience with a family member who had adopted from this law firm in Kansas. So we reached out to them. And it's funny to think about this now, because of course now it would all be done on the internet, I'm sure. Yeah. But at that time, I wrote a letter, and my husband was a journalist as well. So between the two of us, we wrote a letter, and sharing about our family and, why we were interested in adopting. We took a picture, and I'm deathly allergic to cats, but we had a cat. He was an outdoor cat. So my husband's holding the cat in the kitchen, and I'm holding the dog. And we made 2,500 copies of this 4x6 photo and this 1-page letter. And we knew something about buying mailing lists because we're in the publishing business. So we bought a mailing list of OBGYNs, and we picked the states and mailed it. Did a direct mailing basically of this letter and photo. And the woman who we ended up working, we actually had one that fell through. We worked with someone who had the baby and had been estranged from her mother. And when the mother found out that she was from a relative that she was going to give the baby up for adoption, she flew in at the last minute and talked her out of it.
Wow.
So
how did you feel about that? Was that heartbreaking?
It was devastating. It was horrible. Here we have the car seat with us. We have the nursery ready, and we, went home with the empty car seat. But within a month or two later, we got a phone call from a young woman, my son's birth mom. Her name is Jennifer. And she had already had one child that she had when she was a freshman in high school. And her mother had custody of the daughter. And she had gotten pregnant again. And the doctor's office said, here, if you're thinking about adoption, here's a folder of letters from prospective parents. And she pulled our letter out and chose our letter and reached out to us. So that was how we made the connection. And she was living in Virginia at the time. We flew out there and met her. And spent kind of a long weekend out there and met her family. And years later, she told me that they had gone out and rented furniture for their house because they were
coming.
They were so worried that, they were trying to look as good as possible, which is ridiculous, of course. But anyway, and so we met her and just, felt strongly that she was a very bright young woman. She had there were many generations of poverty in the family, and she'd had a pretty rough life, but, we had a good connection with her. So that was in September, and our son Austin was born in November. So we formed a close bond with her. And we adopted in Kansas because, and it probably is still the case, being a rural state, a lot of adoptions take place within families. So someone gets pregnant,
Yes.
maybe a cousin or an aunt, you know, someone else in the family. So they've made it, it's quite an adoption friendly state. I haven't checked in on that lately, but it probably still is. And an adoption.
Monica, that happens a lot within families, like you said, and a lot of times informally, right? There's no actual real adoption process. That happened with me. I raised my niece since birth, but I never formally adopted her. And I can probably name several people over generations who've done that, who've just taken the child and raised them without formalization.
Well, and then about 2 years later, she reached out to us, and she waited quite a long time to tell us, but she said, I hate to tell you this, but I'm pregnant again, and I don't want to marry the father. And you are the only people that I would give this baby up to. You have to adopt this baby. And we were not planning to adopt again. And so we didn't tell her yes immediately. I think we thought about it, you know, for a week or so. And then we reached back out and said yes, that we would. We thought if we were ever going to adopt again, you know, the opportunity to have biological siblings, you know, was wonderful for them to be in the same family. Yeah. And so we then adopted our son, Alex, who is just shy of 3 years younger than Austin. Now there's another twist to this. My best friend in Michigan had gone through menopause in her 30s and couldn't have children. And she was just about to marry someone who had lost his wife to cancer. And he had 2 children. So, but she was in her 30s and late 30s, I think, at that point, and knew she couldn't have children. Well, Jennifer, our son's birth mom, reached out to us, and she said her sister was expecting. And when she was about 7 months pregnant, it blew up with the father. She wasn't going to stay with him. And she decided she wanted to relinquish the baby as well. And she had decided that it had to be someone in our family. And they reached out, and I remember at the time one of my older brothers had just gotten married, and he said, "No, I can't. I can't do this." So we thought about my dear friend, reached out to her, and her husband was a little wary of it because he had been a single dad for a while after losing his wife. And she said, "You know what? I'm going to do it." So she adopted, and this little boy who was then actually he's only a month younger than Alex, so this was kind of happening at the same time. And she adopted him, and so it's our son's first cousin technically. And we've they had always called her aunt, and because she was so close. And so so we raised these boys together, with the same birth family, essentially.
How do the boys feel about their real biological parent giving them up?
I think they're grateful that they did, because they have watched. She has 2 daughters as well, and they've had a really, really rough time. They've had a lot of serious challenges through the years, homelessness, some
to help her, or
some abusive relationships, just a lot of stuff. And I always tried to really shelter them for most of that, but I always kept a very close connection to her, because I always felt like, of course, for many, many reasons, but if there was ever a medical concern with the kids and I needed to know something about what was going on in the family, I could just pick up the phone and ask her. It wasn't a mystery. And they both have a relationship with her. They don't speak with her often, but it's the same thing. If they have a concern, or they need to, they know they can reach out to her.
Do they speak to their siblings? to the girls?
They do, and we maintained a very close relationship with both of their siblings. And in fact, we've been in North Carolina for about 27 years, but prior to that, we were in Michigan. We lived actually on a farm that had been in my husband's family for 200 years. And every summer we would have the girls come stay with us. One summer they were there for 6 weeks, and but always for at least a couple of weeks. And we would take them school shopping for the next year, get school shoes, get them, like fully ready for school.
Right.
We'd take them to the dentist, in the summer. Just some things to help get them ready for the next year, to give them a little more confidence. Always sent winter coats to them every year, just, anything that we thought that they needed.
Yeah.
So yeah, we've stayed, we've always stayed close to them, and I still am close to both of them. Both of the sisters.
I know kids who the adoption was open. They started out as foster kids, and then the foster parent adopted them. They want nothing to do with their parents.
Yeah. Well, there is, there's a history of alcoholism and addiction, and,
Yeah.
some serious issues there. And I think that my sons feel like had they stayed in their biological family, they'd probably be in jail right now, or they wouldn't have gotten through school. And my younger son has a learning disability. He had a lot of challenges in school. And both of my sons
get help with that. That's something
exactly. I mean, we just always had, we were able to, they've always had good health insurance, et cetera. I mean, they've, and they're very aware of that. They're very aware that, they feel fortunate that they, that they were adopted. So I don't think there was, and they, my younger son, Alex, went through a period where he really wanted to meet his birth father, and he never has. And he's now had some correspondence with him through Facebook and what have you. But, he never had an opportunity to meet him. And his birth mom didn't feel that his birth father would be a good influence on him. Let's put it that way. And so she sort of sheltered him from that. But so I think, all adopted children have some struggles, going through that. It's not a smooth road for sure.
Do you think if they were adopted from another country, that bond between the birth mother would still, would be as easy or as simple?
No, I think it would be harder if you were another, and they have physically met her, a number of times. So, I mean, we met them at Disney World and did, we did trips like that with them, met them in Florida where my parents lived for years, and did beach trips and what have you. So they have some experience of, some fun things that we've done together through the years. And certainly if it was somebody in another country, that would probably be number one. You probably would not have the identity. It wouldn't be an open adoption. And, they would be searching for them probably, if they really wanted to know them. With Ancestry and 23andMe and all the ways that you can do that now, they might be able to find the person, but it certainly would have been more challenging to them. But
now, do you think they're more prone to adopt other kids themselves now that they've been adopted?
Yeah, they have their own biological children, both of them. And so I don't think they would, not that they would be against it. Austin's wife, family has actually had foster children through the years, and they've adopted. So, they're very supportive of it. But Austin has 2 biological children, and, I don't think they probably would adopt at this point, but they understand adoption, certainly. And, the challenges that come with it. And my husband, because he was 15 years older, turned 50 a few months after Austin was born. And so, and then he also took an earlier retirement. And so he went on every field trip. He,
Oh, that's
you
so
know,
nice.
went to never missed a sporting event, never missed anything. And unfortunately, John passed away in 2016 with cancer, but the boys were both really, really close to him. And he, you know, I think that their friends sometimes thought that he was their grandfather, not their dad, right? And they heard that a lot, but but they had a very, very close relationship with him, and he said, you know, had 3 biological children. He said, there's just no difference. You know, I'm as
Right.
closer, you know, to my sons as any of my children. So
That's such a wonderful story. And I know you were telling me about the scoliosis.
well, we were talking about firsts, you know, what other firsts? And I was thinking, so I have scoliosis, which is a curvature of the spine. And they first noticed it when I was 15. My grandmother was always made a lot of my clothing, and she was zipping up a dress and saw that my spine wasn't straight. And so I started having it checked at the University of Michigan Hospital in Ann Arbor. And it was progressing quite fast. And what they told me was if I didn't have surgery on it, I would be in a wheelchair by the time I turned 50. I wouldn't be able to walk. So it was a 90-degree curvature at the point that I had surgery, which was when I was 29. But the surgery was, I guess you could call it a first, because my mother saw a show called That's Incredible. It was a TV show
I
where they
remember
showed,
that.
do you remember that?
Yes.
And they showed this young woman, I think she was 15, who had scoliosis surgery with a Harrington rod. And it was attached, the rod was attached so securely with this double hook at the top and bottom that for the first time, you didn't have to go into a full body cast to have scoliosis surgery. Prior to then, you literally had to go into full body cast,
Yeah.
and it was for a year, and you had to learn to walk again. And it was just this terrible, frightening surgery. So
I remember kids with scoliosis that they literally were like this. We would visit them because they wouldn't come out, or they couldn't really come out. And we would visit, and they would just really be frozen in one spot for like a year.
Yeah. Well, and I was a very active, you know, kid. I took dancing, took ballet and tap for 13 years. I was a cheerleader, you know, I did all the stuff. So, I mean, I couldn't imagine, you know, going through something like that. But she saw this surgery. And so I was 29. And I went to, there was only one doctor in the country who did it. He happened to be in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and I was living in Michigan at the time, in southern Michigan. So it was only a 3-hour drive away. Not that I wouldn't have gone somewhere across the country, but, you know, it made it even easier. And he was trained by the doctor in Canada who had invented the procedure. So I had it done. I had some complications with deep vein thrombosis. Otherwise, I probably would have gotten out earlier. I was in the hospital for about a month with it. It's probably outpatient surgery today. I wouldn't be surprised. Right. But, you know, I did stay in for a month. And it was about an 18-month recovery. I mean, I couldn't bend at the waist for the first 6 months. And I had to go into, I think they called a striker bed. So it looked like you were a rotisserie chicken. And they drilled holes in your skull here and by both of your knees. And you were completely flat for 11 days. And they put weights on it every day to pull your spine. And they added more weight. And then they had figured out that at 11 days, that was as straight as your spine was going to go. But they basically,
painful?
No, I mean, it was scary because you couldn't move, you couldn't get up, you couldn't do anything. And it flipped over, so you could face down or you could face up. And I had family there. I had, you know, the family was there in force for it. My sister-in-law at the time took 3 weeks off of work and stayed with me, and literally 3 shifts a day I had somebody in the family with me. But But at the end of the 11 days, you then went into surgery and they put the rod in and they held it, where it was. And I think they got it from 90 degrees down to 33 degrees.
Wow.
It's since, all the wires and what have you have broken now. And they actually told me recently that one of the hooks has come unhooked. And I've said, is there anything I need to do about it? And they said, nope, not as long as you're not in any pain. But eventually the hardware does break.
Will your spine start curving again?
Well, it's relaxed through the years.
I mean, mine probably is because I hold my head down to a computer. Like, we're all getting some form of that, and I feel it. And I went to my chiropractor. They take a picture of your spine, and he's like, whatever degrees alignment I'm out of. But that's kind of a form of you doing it to yourself.
Yeah.
Right.
It has certainly, I don't know what my curvature is now. It's certainly, not 33. It's gotten worse through the years, but, and my back is not flat once, it pushes your lungs as well, on one side.
But it's not noticeable. It's not something that's really noticeable.
And I don't have any back pain. So I've been very fortunate through the years. I've not, my husband used to have a lot of back trouble, and, I was always told don't lift any more than 30 pounds. And I've certainly picked up suitcases that were too heavy through the years and that kind of thing, which is why I'm sure all these wires, broke.
Yeah.
But I think I've been lucky with it. I mean, it's certainly, and a lot of people I remember at the time said, oh my gosh, you're so brave to do that. And I said, if somebody tells you that if you don't do it, you're going to be in a wheelchair when you're 50, it's not
11
brave.
hours versus a lifetime.
You're just going to do it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just something that you have to get through. So it did take about, I want to say, like 18 months for the bone, to be strong. They take bone out of your hips and they wrap it like a Band-Aid around it, and so it's, the recovery process was not easy, and I remember after that saying, I'm never going to complain about any other health issue. After doing this, I'm never going to complain about anything. When I stood up after that surgery for the first time, I was 3 inches taller.
Oh my goodness.
And I remember my husband was standing right there and we were nose to nose, and he said, wow, I can't believe how much taller you got. So I said, if I hadn't had it at all, I probably would have been 6 feet tall. I don't know.
Yeah, because you're pretty tall. Well, I have nothing to say about that because I'm 5 feet nothing. And I had no kind of, issues that I know of. That's just, I think it's hereditary and genetic from my I have very, very short family or very, very tall. There's no in between. We're always opposites. But
scoliosis is hereditary too.
Yeah.
I'm not sure they used to know that, but I think they know that now.
Yeah. One thing I like about what you're doing, particularly with the enterprising women, is you're giving back as well as you're looking out for the next generation. And so you have now enterprising women for young people under 30.
Well, so we have a couple things we're doing. We are giving a new award this year, an Innovator of the Year award to women 30 and under. This is something new, and we're excited about it. Unlike the big Enterprising Women of the Year award, you don't have to have been in business for 3 years. It's not based on the amount of revenue for your company. It does, I mean, we go beyond looking at revenue. With the Enterprising Women of the Year award. You have to show leadership in your community. You have to be mentoring and supporting other women or girls. So there's, a bigger picture here. But yeah, we wanted to recognize some younger women, and it's going to be exciting to see. We haven't, the deadline is February 1st for those nominations. So we're excited to see.
I've sent out a couple, and I'm still going to keep sending it out because there are some young women. What I wanted to ask can they have a side business? Like if they're working in corporate and they have a business that they're fully running, but that's not their main source of income?
Yeah, I sure. And what we said was we'd like to see that they're in business at least 1 year. So it's not just an
Right,
idea that
right.
somebody launched last month. It's actually a business that has been started. And they have a creative or innovative solution to a business challenge. That's kind of the way we put it. So we're assuming that some of these will be technology-based solutions. And
I
others.
have to rethink that. I know some young ladies who started businesses in college, and they're viable businesses now that they're running, but they still work in corporate. And so they do this online, some with online businesses, but I don't know if they meet that criteria of anything
Well, you
innovative.
could have them fill out the nomination form for
Yeah,
it.
yeah, I'll do that.
The other thing that we're doing for young women, which we're just so proud of, in 2012, we started the Enterprising Women Foundation as a separate 501c3 nonprofit to the magazine, which is a C Corp. So, but the idea behind that was we have a woman who's been on our advisory board for 18 plus years, Edie Frazier. And Edie had started something called STEM Connector and Million Women Mentors project within STEM Connector, really to address this issue of the gap between the number of girls and boys, men and women in the STEM fields, and really trying to do something about it, because we weren't seeing any improvement over the last 20 years to speak of. And so we joined STEM Connector when it was started, and now there are probably over 500 partners in STEM Connector. But at the time, we were one of the initial 60 partners, and Enterprising Women was the only partner with an entrepreneurship connection. So we tried to think about what we could do to make a difference. With Million Women Mentors, the goal was to create mentorship opportunities for 1 million young women, high school, college, and early in their careers. They have now far surpassed that number. I think it's over 3 million that they've put together. But they put this coalition was Fortune 500 companies, universities, girl serving organizations like Girl Scouts and Girls Inc. and others. And again, we were, really the only one at that time with this entrepreneurship connection. So we said, we've got this large community of women entrepreneurs that we've worked with, who either get the magazine or women who won our award, et cetera. So we put together a 2-hour after school program that could be done in a high school. Now, a lot of the time it's done during the day. And in each community where we host it, we usually have one of our advisory board members chairing it or co-chairing it, not necessarily, but most of the time. And we assemble a panel of women CEOs from STEM-based businesses. So it's, people running IT, technology companies, people in healthcare, physicians, engineering firm CEOs, et cetera. And because the M in STEM is for math, I always feel like that brings in other kinds of businesses as well. And so the girls hear the panel for 30 minutes, really talking about not only opening their eyes to some fields that they may not have thought about, but also planting the seed that, if you become an engineer, think about starting your own company someday, bring in the entrepreneurship connection as well, with the idea that you can't be what you can't see, really giving them role models. And for a lot of these girls, they probably have never met a woman CEO from a company anyway, but let alone in any of these fields. Then we do small group mentoring with them. So we sprinkle the adults around the room. So there's one adult at each table with maybe 6 girls or so. And they spend another half hour really getting to know the girls a little bit better, finding out what they're interested in, encouraging them, hearing about what their college plans might be. And then this year, we're really excited. We just received a grant from the Institute for Consumer Money Management to add a financial literacy component to the program. So we're adding a 1 hour. Yeah, we're adding a 1 hour financial literacy. It's a game I happen to be involved with this institute. It's here in the Research Triangle area of North Carolina, and I've served on their board. So I reached out to them to see if they felt it was a good fit. I thought it was, but we invested about $1 million in research funds with Duke University and Nova to develop a game to teach financial literacy to students ages 10 to 20. And so the girls who attend our program will spend about 45 minutes actually playing this financial literacy game. It's in 3 different levels, and then we'll have some time to introduce it and to wrap it up. But we're going to test this in 5 big cities here in the spring where we're hosting events, and reach 100 to 150 girls in each one. And then hopefully this will become a permanent part of our program because, we know there's a real need to do it. We then have another component to this. We give out scholarships in each local city. And so girls are chosen from each city to come to the Enterprising Women Conference in the spring. And there we have usually about 8 or 10 of our advisory board members who will fly in a day early. And we give the girls leadership training, public speaking, self-confidence building skills, a panel on what it means to be an entrepreneur, a panel on opportunities in the STEM fields. We match each of them with 3 mentors who are in the field that they're interested in. And they do 3 20-minute one-on-one mentoring sessions, which have been really impactful. And then they overlap the first day of our conference. So they hear our keynote speaker, and we have something called Sheed Moments that are like TEDx talks.
Right.
And our luncheon on Monday showcases the girls. So we have the girls get up and introduce themselves, which is really impactful for them to be standing up in front of a ballroom,
Yes,
cheering women, right? So we are so proud of that program, and it's really in 2023, it's exploding in growth. We're excited about it, and really
I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it last year. I was one of the mentors, and I really enjoyed it, and I'll do it again this year. And I will work really hard to make sure that comes to the New York area.
Yes, thank you so much, Sandi. And you're co-chairing the New York event, which we're thrilled about with Gia. So it's a wonderful program. Let's just put it that way. It's a win-win. Everybody who's involved in it, from the students to the parents to the teachers, administrators, the volunteers, the women CEOs who come, everybody loves it, and we get emails about the impact that they see that it's having. And many of the women who volunteer for it say, this is the most meaningful thing I've ever done in terms of volunteer work. So anyway.
Thank you. Thank you for being on the podcast today. You certainly had enough firsts that were really interesting. And I will make sure that especially the Young Entrepreneur Program gets sold. We probably could use some of these sound bites to help promote that as well. I will let you know when your podcast is coming out. And thank you so much for being on here.
Thank you, Sandi. This was fun. I enjoyed it.
This is Dr. Sandi. Thank you so much for sharing your journey on the first, where no 2 stories are alike, even if the circumstances are similar. Let this discussion serve as inspiration for others to show what's possible, and more importantly, to produce seconds and thirds.